I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I have a PhD in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists, and as you might expect, I love to read. Today I have another installment in the 18th century novel project for you. We will be looking at The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith from 1766, which I read in July. Please do note there will be spoilers for this, so if you do not want to know the major plot points, you should leave now. So we are going to start with some history and a summary, then move into the themes that I noticed, and we'll end with my thoughts on it just as a book. Let's jump in. Oliver Goldsmith was Anglo-Irish, born November 10th, 1728. We think that's what he told a biographer. We don't actually have any records of it, so we're just going to assume that he knew his own birthday, but I don't know. He then died on April 4th, 1774 at the age of 45. He moved to London in 1756 and became a hack writer on Grub Street. So Grub Street was kind of the center of literary and printing and everything. And a hack writer is usually a term applied for somebody who is like really rushing out works, a lot of articles and things to order, kind of. And it also means he's writing for money. So he was trying desperately to support himself. However, he had a gambling addiction, so it was not going very well. He wrote a ton of stuff, lots of articles and other works of nonfiction, lots of poetry, and lots of plays. However, he only wrote one novel, The Vicar of Wakefield, as I said, published in 1766. This is the story of Dr. Primrose and his family when they are suddenly impoverished because the investor who had his money went bankrupt and skipped town. This messes up a whole lot of things. Their oldest son, George, was supposed to be marrying a young lady named Arabella Wilmot, who's very wealthy. Her father does not allow that marriage to go through. And they end up all having to leave the place where they live and are happy and move to a different parish where they can live a cheaper life. This parish the land is owned by Squire Thornhill, who has a really bad reputation as a womanizer. But his uncle, Sir William, is known as like the best, kindest, most generous man on the face of the planet. So they quickly become friends with two different people. The first is Mr. Burchell, who is this guy that just kind of wanders around the county. He is poor, but he is very kind. He saves their younger daughter, Sophia, from drowning, and she begins falling in love with him, which their mother is not very happy about. They also start to become friends with Squire Thornhill, who Olivia starts to fall in love with. And Mrs. Primrose is like, yeah, go for that one. Yeah, because he's rich. However, Olivia eventually elopes with Thornhill. He arranges a faux wedding ceremony so that she thinks they're married, but then he plans to abandon her. He has done this with multiple women before because he's a piece of trash. Her father does come and get her and brings her home. And then when they get there, their house is on fire. So yeah, that's great. They lose everything, but Squire Thornhill insists that they pay the rent, which they don't have because they don't have anything. They can't even live in the house. So he sends Primrose to prison for failure to pay the debt. In the meantime, oldest son George is also put in prison because he hears about what Thornhill has done to his sister and he challenges him to a duel, which Thornhill does not take him up on, but does send several servants to kind of gang up on George. And George becomes injured in that, but he also severely injures someone else who is thought to be dead, hence to prison. And then in the meantime, Olivia dies, because why not? And Sophia is abducted. So everything seems really horrible, like the lowest point of low. But in comes Mr. Birchall, who it turns out is actually Sir William. He wanders around the county in disguise, trying to find people who like him for more than just his money. You know, like you do. Sophia is rescued and she marries Sir William. George is cleared of all charges because the person who supposedly died did not in fact die and was off kidnapping Sophia not long after. He marries Arabella as intended. Olivia is not dead. That was a lie that another one of their friends told them to try to get Primrose to apologize, basically, to Thornhill for everything. Wild choice, but okay. And it turns out that Thornhill's servants deceived him, and that faux wedding ceremony was not so faux. In fact, it was very real. So he and Olivia are married, and that makes her respectable, despite the fact that he's still a dick and he goes off and is doing his dickish thing, and they're estranged. Primrose's money is returned because that sneaky investor is found, and we all live happily ever after. So that is the plot at its most basic. It's not a very long book, so that covers basically all the major plot points. What are some of the themes that I noticed? So the biggest theme here is Christian values. Primrose embodies all Christian values, kind of to the point of naivete, but it's okay. He's very generous. He's willing to help everyone. He's willing to see the good in everyone. When he's in prison, he's preaching to the prisoners, trying to convert them, and is successful with some of them. He's just this really good guy. Describes his family. In short, a family likeness prevailed through all, and properly speaking, they had but one character, that of being all equally generous, credulous, simple, and inoffensive. He then goes on to tell us, this is at the very beginning, and he is our narrator, Primrose meaning. He goes on to tell us, the profits of my living, which amounted to but £35 a year, I made over to the orphans and widows of the clergy of our diocese. For having a sufficient fortune of my own, I was careless of temporalities and felt a secret pleasure in doing my duty without reward. So, yeah, he's giving things away. People are taking advantage of it, but he doesn't seem to mind. He says at another point, hospitality is one of the first Christian duties. The greatest stranger in this world was he who came to save it. He never had a house, as if willing to see what hospitality was left remaining amongst us. So this is why he's inviting people in, he's feeding them, he's giving them things. Even when they're in poverty, he's still doing this. Related to this kind of theme of Christian values is this idea of happiness. Now, in the introduction to my edition, written by Stephen Coote, which is an interesting last name, Coote writes, throughout the novel, contentment is suspect. The rural idyll is brutally shattered, and a happy but poorer new home is invaded by Thornhill. And literally that keeps happening. Disaster happens, they kind of recoup, and they're like, all right, it's fine, we can still be happy. And then disaster strikes again. So Primrose at one point says, what thanks do we not owe heaven for thus bestowing tranquility, health, and competence? I think myself happier now than the greatest monarch on earth. Yes, Deborah, we are now growing old, But the evening of our life is likely to be happy. We are descended from ancestors that knew no strain, and we shall leave a good and virtuous race of children behind us. While we live, they will be our support and our pleasure here, and when we die, they will transmit our honor untainted to posterity. And then they realize that Olivia has eloped. And like literally 3 sentences later, he says, "Now then, my children, go and be miserable, for we shall never enjoy 1 hour more." And this just keeps happening. Like every time they're gonna be okay, nah, Another time, he has finally regained Olivia after her elopement, and now my heart caught new sensations of pleasure the nearer I approached to that peaceful mansion, meaning his home. And then I saw the house bursting out in a blaze of fire and every aperture red with conflagration. And he's like, "No, it's gonna be okay. My family is safe. Now let the flames burn on and all my possessions perish. Here they are. I have saved my treasures. Here, my dearest, here are our treasures, and we shall yet be happy." And then Squire Thornhill shows up not long after, wanting the rent, and then throws him in prison. So it's just this repeated happiness burst. And while he is in prison at one point, he says, "Look round the world and see if there be any happiness left me now. Is not every ray of comfort shut out, while all our bright prospects only lie beyond the grave?" So, like, it's kind of heartbreaking. It's also really funny just because of the way it happens. But, like, also that's really heartbreaking. Primrose is very much based on Job in the Bible, which, if you know that story, Job is very prosperous. He has lots of children. He's wealthy. And God and the devil are like making a bargain to see if the devil can get this very devout person to curse God. So he inflicts all these horrible things on him. His children die, he becomes ill, he loses all his wealth, he's miserable, and yet he still does not curse God, although he has a very interesting conversation with God. Anyway, so that's kind of the position Primrose is in. And what it comes down to is this idea that kind of the best happiness is only in heaven. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with our earthly things. It's all about the after. So in one of his sermons to the people in the prison, I believe that's where we are, he says, "If the rich have the advantage of enjoying pleasure here, the poor have the endless satisfaction of knowing what it was once to be miserable when crowned with endless felicity hereafter. And even though this should be called a small advantage, yet being an eternal one, it must make up by a duration what the temporal happiness of the great may have exceeded by intenseness." The time will certainly and shortly come when we shall cease from our toil, when the luxurious great ones of the world shall no more tread us to the earth, when we shall think with pleasure on our sufferings below, when we shall be surrounded with all our friends, or such as deserved our friendship, when our bliss shall be unutterable, and still to crown all unending. And then the novel ends with the line, "I had nothing now on this side of the grave to wish for. All my cares were over. My pleasure was unspeakable. It now only remained that my gratitude and good fortune should exceed my former submission and adversity." So this idea that, yes, you are going to be suffering on this earth, but it will all be worth it in heaven. I don't know if I agree with that, but that is like the major theme, I guess. There is also a very big theme of vanity and how we should not be vain. So his wife and his daughters especially They're very kind and generous, but they're beautiful, they know it, and it gives them satisfaction. He says, "It would be fruitless to deny my exultation when I saw my little ones about me, but the vanity and the satisfaction of my wife were even greater than mine." And they dress in lovely clothes, and they have like all these washes for their skin. And when they become poor, he's like, "No, we should not do that anymore." My chief attention thereafter was now to bring down the pride of my family to their circumstances. And he does this, he thinks it goes well, and then Squire Thornhill comes in and kind of starts stoking these ambitions to something higher. And so they dress up very fine one Sunday. And Primrose says, "How well soever I fancied my lectures against pride had conquered the vanity of my daughters, yet I still found them secretly attached to all their former finery. They still loved laces, ribbons, bugles, and catgut. My wife herself retained a passion for her crimson potasoy," I don't know what that is, "because I formerly happened to say it became her. I could not help smiling at their vanity, particularly that of my wife, from whom I expected more discretion." And so along with this idea of vanity comes this theme of class, because he very much feels that their pride should come down because their class status has come down. He says to them, "For finery is very unbecoming in us who want the means of decency. I do not know whether such flouncing and shredding is becoming even in the rich, if we consider upon a moderate calculation that the nakedness of the indignant world may be clothed from the trimmings of the vain." So yeah, this idea that it's really unacceptable in people of their status, but it's even like not great in the rich people. So class is a major theme as well. And the class difference between them in Thornhill is constantly made note of, in not a good way either. He says, "Disproportioned friendships ever terminate in disgust. And I thought, notwithstanding all his ease," Squire Thornhill, "that he seemed perfectly sensible of the distance between us. Let us keep to companions of our own rank. There is no character more contemptible than a man that is a fortune hunter, and I can see no reason why fortune hunting women should not be contemptible too." Of course, Mrs. Primrose is very eager for her daughters to continue socializing with Mr. Thornhill. She was of opinion that it was a most fortunate hit, for she had known even stranger things at last brought to bear. She hoped again to see the day in which we might hold up our heads with the best of them, and concluded she protested she could see no reason why the two Miss Wrinklers should marry great fortunes and her children get none. And again, with Dr. Primrose's opinion, unequal combinations are always disadvantageous to the weaker side, the rich having the pleasure and the poor the inconveniences that result from them. Which of course is true on a small scale, and then on a huge scale when Thornhill elopes with Sophia. But even on a small scale, just when they're trying to entertain Squire Thornhill and his friends, Primrose says, "Mr. Thornhill came with a couple of friends, his chaplain and feeder. The servants, who were numerous, he politely ordered to the next alehouse, but my wife, in the triumph of her heart, insisted on entertaining them all, for which, by the by, our family was pinched for 3 weeks after." So like, even on a small scale, trying to like keep up with the Joneses, 18th century style, is really putting them out. And it's a complete disadvantage to them, not an advantage. We first meet Mr. Thornhill. We're told that Olivia thought him therefore a very fine gentleman, and such as consider what powerful ingredients a good figure, fine clothes, and fortune are in that character will easily forgive her. Mr. Thornhill, notwithstanding his real ignorance, talked with ease, and could expatiate upon the common topics of conversation with fluency. It is not surprising, then, that such talents should win the affections of a girl who by education was taught to value an appearance in herself and consequently to set value upon it in another. And Mrs. Primrose says, "And now, my dear, I'll fairly own that it was I that instructed my girls to encourage our landlord's addresses. I had always some ambition, and you now see that I was right, for who knows how this may end?" And Primrose says, "I could have been better pleased with one that was poor and honest than this fine gentleman with his fortune and infidelity." And once their troubles are starting, thanks to Thornhill, Primrose points out, "But he can triumph in security, for he is rich and we are poor." And this has been something that we've been seeing throughout these novels of the 18th century, is the rich kind of taking advantage of the poor and being able to do it because they are rich. And that is absolutely what Thornhill is doing. He's kind of a, like, Mr. B from Pamela, except he doesn't, like, have a miraculous redemption. And so just before he goes to prison, Primrose says to Thornhill, "Go and possess what fortune has given thee, beauty, riches, health, and pleasure. Go and leave me to want, infamy, disease, and sorrow. Yet humbled as I am, shall my heart still vindicate its dignity. And though thou hast my forgiveness, thou shalt ever have my contempt." Of course, in the end, good triumphs. Primrose's Christian values win out, him being humble and generous with people and just always putting himself into God's hands is the reason that he gets the happy ending that he does. Very much a story of, in the Bible, the Beatitudes, it says the meek will inherit the earth. This is very much that. So those are the major themes that I noticed. What did I think of it as a book? It was fine. Like, it's a good story. I wish it had been longer, to be honest. Which I've been so excited to have a short book because some of these, jeez. But I really wanted more fleshed out characters. I felt like the girls didn't really have any personality. Like, they were basically, you could just interchange them and you wouldn't even know. So yeah, I just wanted to go deeper into the characters, which I think is not really the point that Goldsmith was going for. But that, I don't know, that's kind of what I was wanting. But it is a good story. I enjoyed reading it. There's some very funny parts. There's also some rather sad parts. Occasionally, his sermons did go on too long, and Goldsmith also inserts some of his poetry into the novel because reasons. And I really could have done without that, but I'm also just not a big fan of random poetry in my novel. However, I suppose I can forgive him because this is the first and only novel he wrote, so he probably didn't really know what he was doing that much. I can see why people in the 19th century were so obsessed with this book. It was one of the most popular texts throughout, when it was published, well through the Victorian period. And I get it. I see why they liked it. It's like all of what they value. So I do get that. It wasn't my favorite, but I didn't dislike it, ultimately. I would recommend giving it a read. I think it's worth it to, have the story, because it is a good story, but also to see what so many authors were inspired by and reference in their own works. This is referenced in Jane Austen's Emma. It is referenced in Mary Elizabeth Braddon's The Doctor's Wife. It is mentioned in so many more other than that, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. So I think it is an important piece of literary history, and from the perspective of seeing the novel develop, I think it is a great one to read. I ultimately gave it 3 stars. So that was my thoughts on The Vicar of Wakefield. Next month, we are looking at The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman by Lawrence Stern, and I'm about halfway through right now. But that's a video for another day. Let me know down in the comments below, have you read The Vicar of Wakefield? What did you think of it? Do you agree with my points? Disagree? Do you think that I missed anything? If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.